probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Grinch. But
what's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. It's another edition of my Cover 3 College Ball Podcast Summer School Series. That's right. We're previewing Auburn today. I'm going to Auburn Undercover. Let's go undercover with my man, Nathan King, who was really good for us last year. Nathan, welcome back, dude.
Glad to be here. Been looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So Auburn, first thing I got to ask about is that Hugh Freeze is back to being the play caller this year. What should we expect to be different from like a play calling and offensive style standpoint?
Yeah, I don't know how much different their actual scheme will be from last year. Still super RPO based, but obviously they did not do very well with that last season. Philip Montgomery, who was obviously the former Tulsa head coach, that marriage just never really worked out. And so you had Hugh Freeze kind of dipping a toe in, coming back out, as he said, focusing more on recruiting. And then it was just kind of a weird fit in year one overall. Actually, before the coordinators were even switched, before both coordinators were even out at the bowl game, Hugh Freeze said, "It's always tough for me to get a staff right in year one." And like, that's with the guys still on staff. So that kind of told you some things. A lot more familiarity in that building now with Derek Nix, who coached with him at Ole Miss, now serving as his offensive coordinator. And so feeling is that with that comfort level, he will have a lot more opportunities to insert himself, not only as a play caller, which he hasn't gone completely concrete on so far. And Derek Nix has sort of maintained that he will have sort of a play calling ability in this offense. But obviously everything is pointing toward Hugh Freeze having a bigger hand in that. That's what Auburn fans want. And the feeling at Auburn is, okay, he's comfortable enough with this operation right now. He's comfortable. He's a lot more comfortable with this coaching staff. That's going to allow him to, have some more free time, have some time. He feels like he can give more of his responsibilities there on the field. But in terms of that system, the fact that you get Peyton Thorne back for a year or two, some tweaks here and there, but I don't expect it to be all too different. So much of it is predicated on that RPO passing game, and that obviously has to be better in order for Auburn to improve next season.
And of course, if you're going to be a team that incorporates tempo, which I assume they'll continue to at least try to do, as Freeze has done, some in the past, your OC, whether or not he's the actual play caller, is generally, especially if he's not actually the play caller, is working ahead. He like his job is to think a play ahead, right? Like let's have two options ready for coach, for him to kind of confirm or pick one based on the potential outcomes of the prior play called and tendencies, and working with guys in the box and analysts and all that jazz. So you mentioned Peyton Thorne. They did kick the tires on Caden Salter in the transfer portal. He ends up going back to Liberty. What is their confidence level in Peyton Thorne and his ability to improve as a player for them this year?
It's probably as high as it's been, but the thing is, you look at last season, there were a lot of pitfalls for this offense. And in terms of the Peyton Thorne saga, will they, won't they go get a quarterback? It's been a bit of a seesaw. Going into the bowl game, the utmost confidence. We don't feel like we need a quarterback. That was a lot of what Freeze was saying. The press conference 30 minutes after they get pasted by Maryland is, the job is wide open. We need to do whatever we need to do to improve the position. Like you said, they kicked the tires. Caden Salter, Cam Ward is also somebody they would have liked to have been involved with. There were a couple other names that we heard as well. They didn't end up getting any of those guys. Now, obviously, the NIL conversation was one thing. You also have to address the fact they had the number 8 recruiting class in the country. So the money was going somewhere. They obviously did get returns off of it. Freeze said he didn't want to pay $1 million for a quarterback. And so here we are with Peyton Thorne, a 6th-year senior, going into his 2nd year as a starter at Auburn. Somebody I didn't mention in terms of that offensive familiarity is Kent Austin. He has now been promoted to quarterbacks coach. He was on staff last year as an analyst. He was an assistant under Freeze at Liberty, has also been at Ole Miss in the past. So that's somebody that's probably the assistant coaching name that came up more than anyone else in the spring, both from Hugh Freeze. Peyton Thorne saying as well, just there were some weird things last year. He said his footwork was completely overhauled by Philip Montgomery. Wanted to get back to it kind of mid-season, didn't really do that. And then a couple weeks into spring practice, Peyton Thorne said they completely changed just a couple aspects of the RPO game. Obviously, didn't really get into detail. The details probably wouldn't have meant anything to us because we don't understand their playbook. But he said just a couple tweaks here and there really made a difference for him, for Ken Austin, for Hugh Freeze. And so, as I'm sure we're going to get to, the biggest part of this offense now moving forward is the fact that their receiving core has been so improved, talent-wise and production-wise, getting some experienced guys and some high-level freshmen. It all comes down to Peyton Thorne, and I hate to make something so singular for a team season. Obviously, there's so many other factors, but for this offense, you really feel like, in the passing game in particular, you really feel like they have done so many good things to support a quarterback. Now you have Peyton Thorne coming back, not necessarily an overly inspiring season, but as you know, Bud, I mean, players are allowed to get better. Even though he's a sixth-year senior, he's still a young college football player. We saw what he did in a good system with good players at Michigan State. He was a very efficient quarterback there for kind of supplementing a run game. That's exactly what they want to do at Auburn. Hit those big play receivers. And look, they don't need. It's only up from here because their passing game was one of the worst in the SEC last season. So they feel like, hey, if you can tick up a few spots in terms of the SEC, passing attacks and their efficiency, they feel like that can equal 2 or 3 extra wins this season.
And I don't really think that we should fault them that bad for not deciding to spend the big time money on some of the quarterbacks that were available in this cycle. If you think Thorne offers a decent floor, right? Just given the type of player that was available for them to go out and spend on and get in high school, and B, kind of how the schedule breaks down and where they are in their sort of window to win. First of all, the best quarterbacks in this class were going to cost you a lot more than just $1 million, right? It's probably more spending for the very, very high end guys, you're probably spending more like $1.75 million, close to $2 million type number. But even if you got one of those guys, due to where some of the games are in terms of location, does getting Cam Ward help you beat Georgia and Athens? Does getting Dylan Gabriel help this roster where they are in their developmental cycle beat Georgia and Athens or beat Bama in Tuscaloosa? Probably not, right? It doesn't hurt you, but is it really going to put you over the top? When I scan this roster, I like what they've done a lot at receivers. They go out, they get Keandre Lambert-Smith. I want to ask you about him. How's the feedback been there so far? Is he actually on campus yet, or what has Auburn said about him?
Yeah, he's on campus. Kind of their big three right now, because Perry Thompson has also reported he's kind of that fringe 5-star guy. He was a 5-star when he flipped from Alabama last summer, and then Cam Coleman. That's the name, number 3 overall recruit in the class. Since I've been around the team, they haven't had a guy like this. It's been a long time, and we know in college football, even when they're young, the type of difference that an NFL receiver can make. Obviously, everything has to go well in terms of Peyton Thorne, but Keandre Lambert-Smith was kind of that guy. Look, they learned their lesson from last year. They went out after the spring and got some really experienced, productive receivers, but they were from the G5 level or from Jackson State. That did not translate well at all during the season. They felt like if they were going to get a post-spring practice receiver, needed to be somebody from the Power 5 level, needed to be somebody who didn't need to get caught up to speed that much in terms of what it means to be a number 1 or number 2 receiver. Enter Keandre Lambert-Smith. I believe we had him at 24/7, the number 2 receiver on the board. 1,700 career yards, 11 touchdowns at a place like Penn State. He's somebody who comes in. Can he be the number 1? Probably a pretty decent chance. I also wouldn't be surprised if Cam Coleman is the number 1. I know he's a true freshman, but unbelievable spring. I mean, every time we were out there, just absolutely ridiculous. But bringing in a guy like a Keandre Lambert-Smith sort of takes the pressure off. It's like, hey, there's a lot of expectations for Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson. They have a couple other 4-star freshmen as well, a couple other transfer additions at receiver that we haven't even mentioned. But Keandre Lambert-Smith was such an important piece for them to say, hey, we've got a veteran now. Excuse me. We've got a veteran now. We've got somebody we can sort of rely on that we know has done it at a high level. Cam Coleman, you do your thing. But if, there's a couple weeks here and there where you're not really doing so hot, we have somebody that we can turn to, and it's somebody who's done it at a high level, in terms of in the Big Ten.
For those of y'all at home who have not had a chance to see Cam Coleman either on television or in person, it reminds me a little bit of the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields thing. It's okay, with him and Jeremiah Smith. Okay, Trevor Lawrence is the number 1 guy. There's no doubt. And I mean, Jeremiah Smith looks like a college junior right now. he's Ohio State might have the best defensive backfield in the whole country, and he's killing them in his first spring on campus. Coleman would be the top receiver recruit in the country in, I think, most of the years that I've been doing this, right? It just so happens that he happened to be in the same class as, as Jeremiah Smith. So I'm glad to hear that you think he's going to play early, because like the stuff he was doing at the Under Armour practices to guys and just consistently, winning one-on-ones, but also not having to make that many contested catches because he was just dusting dudes, is a great combo. If you get open a lot and then you also win the ones where you're not super open, that's studies show. Very good. Who is a guy who, let's fast forward like 6 weeks to Dallas, who is not going to get picked for, first or second team all SEC by the media. And, when you're with the Auburn beat, you're like, you know what? This guy has a pretty good shot to actually make this by the end of the season.
Someone who's not going to get picked. I'm tempted to touch on the offensive line just because I feel like it's a position that has improved since Jake Thornton got on campus as the position coach, since Hugh Freeze got there. Connor Lew is a guy that was a freshman last year, stepped in after an injury. In terms of where he was rated as an interior offensive lineman by 24/7, I believe if we had had a specific center position, he would have been one of the 2 or 3 best centers in the country. He steps in. He was a 24/7 freshman All-American last year. They believe he's a superstar. He's got superstar potential there on the offensive line. Dylan Wade is also a guy on the O-line that I'm looking at in terms of NFL experience and NFL potential moving forward. He was their starting left tackle last season. Now he kicks inside the left guard. It's not a position he's actually played his entire career, but they feel like that is the most NFL potential for him. They feel like that's actually where he fits best. Wouldn't be surprised if he's going to be a guy who's going to have a really big impact this season. Then I'll touch on a transfer guy on defense. I think Jalen McLeod, the pass rusher, their top pass rusher, he has a chance to be, like you talked about, on an all SEC team. How about Kieran Crawford, who comes over from Arkansas State? Really, really productive guy. They needed like a number 2, a complement. When you're in third down now against Auburn, they have a couple really capable pass rushers. Now, how well can a group of 5 guy translate to the SEC? McLeod did it really well last year. It doesn't always happen, but I just think that turned out really well for them in terms of touching on guys in the transfer portal, getting a guy like Kieran Crawford along that defensive front, because that was the name of the game for them here in the post-spring transfer portal, was filling in gaps along the defensive line. A couple guys on the interior D line that we haven't mentioned yet that they also got in the portal, but Crawford there on the edge, I think he's kind of got some special tools that will allow him to be a high-level pass rusher here in this league, and we already know McLeod is one of those guys. So I'd probably go with those couple guys, especially as we get into the summer here and go into the preseason. I'll be interested to see how they progress, particularly those transfers that weren't here for spring practice.
As we know, football is a collision sport, not a contact sport. What positions can they most survive, injuries and attrition at?
Yeah, the O-line's probably one. They've got a nice 2 deep there, which is not something we've said about Auburn since.
That's good.
I mean, go back to Gus Malzahn. It's been quite some time. Now the second group is not as good, but they feel like they've brought in transfers and freshmen and again JUCO guys. They've got a JUCO right tackle they thought would contend for the starting job. The starting right tackle from last year took some steps forward, and he was another JUCO guy, and so they feel like they've built some nice depth there. I hesitate to say wide receiver because again, that's been a position that I would not have said that. They've just done such a nice job with the overhaul, and an injury or 2. I don't hate the idea of Perry Thompson getting playing time. Like, I think he will probably be a pretty nice player for them. I would say the secondary, there are some interesting questions for them to answer. They certainly have the depth and they certainly have the guys. Like, their entire 2 deep in the secondary is just a bunch of 4-star freshmen and 4-star sophomores. But it's guys who haven't really proven themselves. They lost a top 3 corner, a guy who was going to be in that main rotation in Colton Hood to the transfer portal. And so that makes me, kind of interested to see what they're going to do with that cornerback rotation, but they've got plenty of names there at corner and safety. So quarterback would be the one that would maybe be rough if you lose a guy like Peyton Thorne. Linebacker, they're not super heavy at. They've got a couple guys. They wanted to get another linebacker in the portal. They haven't done that yet. And then the defensive line, I think they have upgraded, but I just don't know about the depth there. I think the guys they put out on the field will be pretty nice. Will do a good job, but it's not SEC level, super high caliber depth yet that Hugh Freeze wants to build over the next couple of years.
Is there a most important or most intriguing fall position battle?
Yeah, there's a bunch. Receiver is obviously one that I think I'll be interested to see who rises to the top. Like, they've got so many names. Can Perry Thompson come in and be a guy that missed all of spring practice but catches up so much in the summer and is able to make a difference. Robert Lewis is a guy we haven't mentioned. I think he's pretty set up to be their slot receiver, a guy from Georgia State, sort of a veteran guy. He's done a really nice job for them. That defensive line is going to have so many interesting position battles. They have like 3 true nose tackles on the roster now. Bringing in Isaiah Rakes from technically USC, really Texas A&M, played under DJ Durkin last year. I think he's probably the best of that group. But you also get Jason Jones back from last year. He was kind of a starting adjacent player. You get a former JUCO guy, Bobby Travis, who they think very highly of. And then that secondary is probably where I land on in terms of the most interesting position battles, just because that number 3 cornerback spot, it's pretty much wide open. A guy, you mentioned the Under Armour camps, Jalen Crawford is a freshman that they thought was really, really good in the spring. He legitimately could be their number 3 corner. Antonio Kite comes over from Alabama. He could have a chance there. JC Hart is a sophomore who could have an opportunity there. And they're still open in the portal to potentially adding somebody. They lose both their starting safeties as well. So Sylvester Smith is a guy who's a sophomore, former highly rated recruit they think can fill in pretty nicely there. Jaron Thompson is a Texas safety transfer who comes in. Laquan Robinson, number 2 JUCO safety in the country, comes in to compete. I say all of that, all of that is really interesting to sort out. And there's probably not many better than Charles Kelly to trust to do that. Like he might be the best coach, period, on this entire, in that building. But it's just a lot different. I'll be interested to see what that means for this team. It's a lot different than what they're used to. They're used to having NFL guys in the secondary. Do they have that this season? I think Auburn fans are going to sort of realize how good they've had it in that regard over the past few seasons.
Safe to say the offense has had a little more success in practices against this defense than it maybe did last year. They do have a pretty nice run up though to get things sorted. The schedule begins really pretty easily. The non-conference, assuming they don't pull like a New Mexico State thing, which I probably should have asked, like, do they have better leadership and just, I don't know, team morale, coach, something like you don't lose New Mexico State in Jordan-Hare if something's not wrong internally, obviously, or you just don't take it seriously. Not that Jared Kill and those guys can't coach, because they certainly can. And, Auburn will have a chance this year to maybe get revenge against a lot of that staff, since a lot of that staff has ported over to Vanderbilt now. But if we think their window to win something by Auburn standards is more in that 25, 26 range, which I think tracks with their spending, as you noted, I kind of love this schedule for showing clear improvement, because you're probably going to lose to Georgia and Bama wherever you play them. So if you get them on the road, all 4 of these road trips, or the other 2 road trips, are pretty manageable, and all 4 SEC home games are extremely winnable, and you have almost a guaranteed 4-0 in the non-conference. Like, I don't know. I feel like this is a very high floor, but also a defined ceiling schedule, and unless Peyton Thorne, becomes Cam Newton or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about that run up. It's pretty nice at the beginning. 5 straight home games. Anytime you have 8 home games, period. Yeah, that's pretty nice. And you look at who they've got. A&M in year 1, Vanderbilt with a roster that, as I understand it, will not even look anything like what it was last year. Arkansas potentially on the last legs for Sam Pittman. Oklahoma in week 5. That's awesome. That's going to be, I believe that's their first SEC road game as an SEC program. Hopefully under the lights in Jordan-Hare, that's going to be great. But, potentially a 4-0 start there with 3 non-con opponents and Arkansas. You feel like Arkansas is a game you should win at home. I mean, I agree with you. You look at this year 2 for Hugh Freeze, they need to show improvement. And the wins and losses don't necessarily, like what the final number is, doesn't matter as much as continue recruiting at a top 10 level for 2025, which is, it appears they're pretty well set in terms of doing that, and show that, hey, if you're Hugh Freeze, I had these ideas, they didn't work out, I can change. I can go from year to year, and even with some of the same personnel, change up things. Mainly, again, it's the passing game. That's everything I come down to. They need to show improvement in the passing game. 7-5 feels very, very attainable for this team because of that home schedule. But like you said, Bud, you cannot have those slip ups. I mean, this is a year where you're counting on those home wins. Don't lose to Vanderbilt because those road games you mentioned, Georgia and Bama, scratch those off already in most years. We'll see, but probably. And then Mizzou and Kentucky, they'll feel pretty good about this season. Returning production, they are up there, I believe, top 20, both in SP Plus in that regard. They barely lost anybody in the transfer portal. So road games will be tough, man. If you can steal one of those, that'd be absolutely massive. So 7-5, 8-4 range feels like the place to be for this team, with the potential, like you said, run the slate at home, go steal one on the road. You can win 9 games next year. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there a young quarterback who they've signed who stood out enough in spring to make where it makes you think, okay, like they got to rotate this guy in for a series, maybe 2 series a game in order to kind of build towards 25? Or do you think that they're more on like this Auburn's 100% in the transfer market for a quarterback come 25?
Yeah, to answer your first question, no, there is not somebody that I think Walker White is that guy that, I believe he's the number 5 quarterback in the class for the future. And it's a good thing that all those guys have stuck around. Their 3 backups all stuck around. Holden Geriner's also a former 4-star, stuck around as well. In terms of getting those guys reps, I just think Walker White, and Hugh Freeze admitted it, Walker White's probably going to be the number 4 guy in the fall. So it's always difficult to get that guy reps. About what they could do in the 2025 class at quarterback. So the potential of having one of those guys like a Juju Lewis or KJ Lacey, somebody like that in that class to go with Walker White and a potential transfer, they think quarterback could be a really good spot for them moving forward. This season, though, like I mentioned before, it feels like all Peyton Thorne. It really feels like Peyton Thorne or bust for them right now. I just don't think a freshman Walker White, I don't think Hank Brown, I don't think Holden Geriner has enough tools to be able to lead this team to 7 wins. I think really they're relying so much on Peyton Thorne this season.
Nathan, really appreciate the time, man. We'll be checking out all your coverage and all your whole crew's coverage there on Auburn Undercover as the fall camp starts and during the season as well, buddy.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all.